All right, let me take your Bibles and let me give you an overview. We started out on Wednesday, and I encourage you to read the first 8 chapters. Well, we haven't gotten anywhere close through 8 chapters, but there's so much in those 8 chapters that is just, it's hard to get through it all very quickly. But let me just give you a little bit of an overview in the next couple chapters, and then we're going to finish our 5 practices of effective leadership. And our theme this week has been asking the question, are you leading or loitering? Are you leading or loitering? And the premise has been that everybody's a leader, and we all influence somebody. And we all have opportunities to lead, and a leader is someone who guides, who moves in a certain direction to accomplish certain goals, whereas a loiterer is someone who is idle, waiting with no apparent purpose. And we're trying to get away from that and be leaders and not loiterers. It's not any easier for me today than it was on Wednesday. And it probably won't be any easier tomorrow either. But I think you can agree with me, can't you? Most of you have been in the church a while, that we have too many loiterers in our churches. And I don't say that bitterly or critically, but I say it very concerned because as the kingdom of God, we can't be inactive. And as Dr. Deal said last night, he didn't save or sanctify us to sit us. So it's imperative that we are leading and becoming and joining in the mission. So anyway, in chapter 2, we're going to do this quickly, then I'm going to get to our other 3 points. Chapter 2, beginning around verse 17, we see the transition from Nehemiah's personal search, personal journey of finding out what's going on in Jerusalem, examining the walls for himself, and now he's beginning to share the vision, the passion, the dream with the people. And he says, "Come, let us build the wall, rebuild the wall, and we'll no longer be in disgrace." And they said, "Let's start rebuilding." Now immediately opposition arose. And if you're going to lead, we have to expect opposition. Now, I will confess to you, I don't like opposition. I don't like it. I'm a woo. If any of you have ever done the Strength Finders thing where it kind of tells what your personality's like and all that, there's one in there that's called woo, W-O-O, and it's winning others over. And a woo wants everybody to like them, all right? And that's fine, except not everybody likes you. So that throws a woo into a spin sometimes. But we have to understand, anytime you take and lead, anytime you take and start moving in a certain direction, you're going to have opposition. And from here on, every once in a while, this opposition pops up. I mean, irregardless of where they're at in the rebuilding, there's always this opposition. And so that's something we just have to expect even if we don't like it. So we have this opposition. In chapter 3, it goes into this rather detailed explanation or record of the different families that rebuilt different gates. And there were many gates, and they were built by different families and different groups, and they all pitched in, took a gate, did their work, and that's what moved them toward accomplishing their mission. Now, chapter 4, we find the opposition again, and we also see the prayer of Nehemiah about the opposition, and I'm just hitting the highlights here. But they kept praying, and verse 6 says, "So we rebuilt the wall till all of it reached half its height, for the people worked with all their heart." So even in the middle of opposition, even in the middle of people who tried to stop them, they kept working, and the wall kept being built, and they kept their eye on the mission, kept their eye on the vision. And in our churches, that's really, really important. Verse 7 starts out again. But when those three guys showed up again, all this took place again. Verse 9, but we prayed to our God and posted a guard to meet the threat. So there again, he took action to make sure they could stay on task. And now this meant even putting guards up to protect against the opposition that might try to attack them. So it's gone from just verbal opposition to perhaps physical opposition, but it didn't stop them. They kept working. So don't miss that thread through here, because their mission was to rebuild the walls and to repair the gates. And that was always their mission. That's what they kept moving toward. So you can read on through there. Chapter 6, again, there's opposition. But here's what I like. Chapter 6, verse 15. So the wall was completed on the 25th of Elul in 52 days. And when all our enemies heard about this, all the surrounding nations were afraid and lost their self-confidence because they realized that this work had been done with the help of our God. I need you to know that if God is in it, God will help you do it. And when you're starting out on a journey where you're a leader, that's why it's crucial to make sure God's in it. And it's not just an idea, it's not just a whim, it's not just something you're trying to do, but that's where I believe the prayer focus and all of that came into play early in chapter 1. God was in this mission. And God helped them, even though it wasn't easy, and even though they faced opposition and threats, God was in it. Now there's one other verse I want to pull out for you, and that is in chapter 4, verse 13. Therefore I stationed, this is again, the threats are against them, but he said, therefore I stationed some of the people behind the lowest points of the wall at the exposed places, posting them as families with their swords, spears, and bows. After I looked things over, I stood up and said to the nobles, the officials, and the rest of the people, very key here, don't be afraid of them. Remember the Lord who is great and awesome, and fight for your brothers, your sons, your daughters, your wives, and your homes. So one more thing about this mission. It wasn't just to rebuild the city for rebuilding the city's sake. It was for their families. It was for their homes. Okay? And when we're doing the work of the kingdom, we've got to remember, this is not just a job. This is about people. It's about people. It's about our families. It's about our homes. It's about our neighbors. All right? And can I say very carefully, and pray for me that I say this right, the things we do, the decisions we make, the attitudes we exhibit, the leadership we take has a direct influence on our kids and other people's kids. And I'm fearful that one of the reasons so many of our churches have no kids or young people is because of past decisions that's been made. Okay, so just think about that. And as we move forward, we need to keep in mind, again, this is not about me. It's about the kingdom and people. So just throwing that in, but that's a very key. He wanted them to keep fighting. He wanted them to keep building because of their families. Just take a look, guys. If we give up now, look who's going to be affected. So let's keep working because we got to save our kids and our families. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So let's keep building, keep working. Okay, let's get back into 5 practices of effective leaders. And anybody remember the first one? Model the way. Set the example. Lead by example. All right? What about the second one? Inspire a shared vision. All right? Inspire shared vision. 3 key words there, and we're not going to rehash all of that, but it's about bringing people together. It's about seeing the future and working toward that preferable future together. All right? Now, the third one. This gets a little more tricky, but I think it's so good. And that is, effective leaders challenge the process. They challenge the status quo. They challenge how things have been done. Now, don't get all hung up on that word challenge, and don't put that in a rebellious framework, okay? Just because it's a challenge or there is a challenge to something doesn't make that negative and doesn't make that rebellious. But what it is, it's an effort to look at how things are and how things are being done and to ask the question, is there a better, more effective way to do this? Okay? We've been doing this way, getting this result. And we want a different result. So is there a different way of doing this to get a different result? All right? Here's what I want you to do for a minute. It's called a personal best exercise. So here's what I want you to do. Think about some time in your life when you succeeded at something, when you did something really well. You came up with an idea, you exercised something, you made a decision, you did something and it was really good, and you consider that one of your life's personal best experiences. Just think about that for a minute. Something in your life that you did that you feel like you were successful at, that you did. Okay, am I asking that right? A personal best, something in your life that you did that you thought that was good. All right? Think about it for a minute. Okay, I'm not going to ask you what it is. We could spend all morning on that. But historically, when we've asked this question, and in my own life, when you answer that question, historically, it often comes out that what one of your personal best was in response to a problem, was in response to a challenge, when it was in response to this wasn't working, so I had this idea and we did this, or this was broken and I was able to fix that. We had this big project and I was able to come in and help do that. Someone had a crisis, I was able to help, whatever. And many times our personal best come out of difficulty. A time we responded, a time we got involved, a time that something happened that we made a decision and it changed the outcome. That's why I'm talking about challenging the process, because we've all done that. We've all done that. So challenging the process is looking at this current situation and asking, is there something else we can do to accomplish our purpose? One of the greatest examples of this is the Wall Drugstore in Wall, South Dakota. Has anybody been to Wall Drugstore? Okay. What a story. What a story in Wall, South Dakota. It was during the Depression, and Ted and Dorothy Husted, he was a pharmacist, she was a teacher. They moved to Wall, South Dakota, a town of 231 people, 1931. And he bought this little drugstore. His dad had left him some money, and he bought this little drugstore in Wall, South Dakota. And times were tough. It was the Dust Bowl years. It was the Depression. But they went into this little town, and their dream was to have this successful drugstore where he could practice pharmacy, and they could raise their little family. But it was times were hard. It was dry, it was a drought, it was hot, and people weren't coming to the drugstore. And so they were barely making it, literally barely making it, and they were discouraged, and they were starting to question, why did we ever come to this little old God-forsaken place? What were we thinking? And they said, we're going to give it 5 years. If it doesn't work, we're gone. Okay, we're out of here. Well, things kept getting bad, and it was a horrible story. So one Sunday afternoon, Dorothy was going to take a nap. She put their baby down for a nap, and she was going to go back in the back room and lay down for a nap. And in a few minutes, she came back out, and Ted said, "What's the matter? Can't you sleep? Is it too hot?" She said, "No, it's not too hot. It's too noisy." She said, "All those jalopies going by on highway, I think it was Highway 16 at the time, all those jalopies going across the highway out there, headed to Mount Rushmore area, it's keeping me awake. It's just too loud." And they began to think, okay, so now the automobile is prevalent. They're building Mount Rushmore, which is a tourist attraction. Interstates are being built, which did not go right through Wall, South Dakota, went around Wall, South Dakota. And on that interstate were all these jalopies with suitcases and luggage and all that strapped on, and families inside in this hot, non-air conditioned car with very little places to stop, and they were hot and thirsty and dusty on their way west or back east. And they got to thinking, here's my point. What do we have that would cause them to come into our town and into our store? I mean, we have ice cream in our store. We have root beer in our store. We have ice water in our store. Let's advertise free ice water. Now, don't miss this point. So they went to work making placards, 12 by 36 inch posters. And on a Sunday afternoon, they went out and they went along the interstate, the highway, and they started putting up these posters with little jingles. And it always included free ice water at Wall Drugstore at the intersection of whatever and whatever. Come and get your free ice water. And before they got back to town from putting the signs out, people had started driving in and said, "We need 5 cups of ice water. Grandma's about to die in the back seat, and we need some ice water." And they started giving out ice water, and they had to keep chopping ice and putting it in cups and giving water. People began to buy root beer, and they began to buy ice cream, and they began to buy this and that and the other thing, and it put Wall Drug on the map. And today, if you were to go there today, you might find 20,000 people in and out of there in one day. If you've ever been there, it's like a whole block. And I mean, they have all kinds of things in this little bitty town, and Wall Drugstore is the town. That is challenging the process. That is saying, you know what? This isn't working, but what will? And it's looking for opportunities to do something to help you accomplish your mission. Instead of just sitting there and griping and complaining about the noisy cars, and why are they building that highway, and why are the cars always going by us instead of coming to town and eventually losing their business, they said, what can we do to attract them to us? And that's a really good question for the church. And they met a need. They met a need. So what is it that our church can do? Why can't our church sit at the Dairy Queen and say, what can we do different? What are we not doing? What do we have that we can offer? Okay? That's challenging the process. Nehemiah started challenging the process early on when he decided to pray about going to see the king. That was not normal process. But he started to go against the grain early and say, I've got to do something different if we're going to get this built. I don't have the resources. I don't have the permission. I don't have the people. I don't have any of that, but I do have access to the king, and if I take a chance, I might be able to get some help from the king. That's challenging the process. You just didn't do that. Okay? And so the third thing that effective leaders do is they look for ideas everywhere. They look for new ways. They're willing to take risks. They're willing to fail. And they're willing to learn from their experiences. How many of you would say you learn more from your failures than you do your successes? Yeah. The things we do and would like to do over teach us more probably than the things that we do that we're right about. So leaders, effective leaders, are willing to look at things differently, different angle, different perspective. What do we have? Okay, what do we have? Here's one thing you need to know about God. God is a God that will use what you have to do what He needs done. Okay? And it's all through the Scripture. What is that in your hand, Moses? It's just a stick. Well, then that's what I'll use. Right? What is that in, what do we have here, guys, to feed this 5,000 people? We just have a little lunch. It's not going to go anywhere. Barely feed a little boy. Well, then that's what we'll use. God always uses what you have to do what He needs done. And often we'll say, I don't have enough or I can't. And what you're saying is God's not able to take what I have and use it. So what do I have that I can use? How can I look at this differently? All right? I wish every church board would once a year just say, okay, let's just wipe everything clean and say, again, as I said yesterday, why are we here and how are we going to accomplish that? And how can we do this differently? I'm afraid too many of us are comfortable with unsuccess. Is that it? Is that the right word? I think too many of us are comfortable with not succeeding in our mission. Instead of looking at new ways, we just keep doing the old thing because that's what we're comfortable with. So challenge the process. Any questions about that? Now, history tells us that they have tried to build this wall for a long, long time and not succeeded. But Nehemiah kept trying. Okay? So is this the only way to do this? What if, let me meddle just a little bit here, but what if we looked at everything we do in our church and asked the question, is this the only way to do this? I mean, what if we said, is this the only way to do this? And just came up with some new ideas. Effective leaders look for ideas everywhere. All right? Any questions or comments about that?
There'd just probably be a lot of sacred cows that would get replaced if we had that kind of evaluation.
Yeah, yeah. How does a sacred cow become sacred? People are possessive of something. How does a cow become sacred? Yeah, at one time it had a purpose, and then it ceases that, and it becomes the focus. Snake on a stick for Moses, sign of God's deliverance, but then it became the idol. Yeah, yeah. So it would be a good idea every once in a while in your church, and I have begun asking this to churches. When I go in on pastoral searches, I'll say, okay, tell me what's not touchable in this church. Have I told you this story? Did I tell you this last year? Oh, you'll love this. So what's not touchable here? And almost invariably, they say, oh, nothing. We don't have any sacred cows here. Yeah. See, that's where you're blind. Because they are mostly in every church. So, okay. So I did this at one church. I said, what's on, because I want to tell, if there's a candidate coming in interview, I want to be able to tell him, watch out for this. Or don't come in your first 2 weeks and do this because there's this sacred cow grazing in the pasture. So I said, okay, so what's untouchable here? Oh, I don't think we have anything. And they look around the table, and I don't think we have anything. I said, come on, think hard. Because if a new pastor comes in and 6 months tries to do this and he gets, chopped off at the knees, I need to know what that is. I don't think. Oh. And it's like a light bulb comes on. I know what it is. The picture in the foyer. And it's like all these lights come on. Oh, yeah. You can't take that picture down. Yeah, really? There's a story behind that picture. There's a story behind it that has now lost its power, lost its meaning to a large degree. New people coming in have no clue what that is, but it's untouchable. All right? So, what question could we ask in that regard? I'm not going to ask you to answer that question, but I have gotten some really interesting answers when I ask boards, what's not touchable here. So we got to be careful of that. So challenge the process. Make everything relevant. How can we do this different? Is there anything we can do to get to our mission better, to accomplish our mission better? Okay? Challenge the process. I challenge the process a lot with my GPS. Got this little lady in my GPS. And she's very persistent and stubborn. So I just turn her off. And so, but on my GPS, it still has a way that it wants me to go. But there are times I don't want to go that way. And so I challenge the process. I make my own decisions. And because I think there's a better way than what they're taking me. And there is often. That's not the best way always. So in our churches, I'm just saying, as leaders, we need to constantly ask, is this the best way to do this? Is there another way to do this? Can we accomplish our mission better, quicker, more effectively by doing something different? Leaders do that. They don't just get stuck in a rut. All right? They don't just get stuck in how it's always been done before. You can go down a rut and not even hold the steering wheel. It just takes you where everybody else has been. You ever been in a rut? I was in a rut in 1980. Oh, what year was the big blizzard in St. Louis? 83, 82, 82. And I lived in a trailer court. I was pastoring Fenton at the time, and I lived in a trailer court, and there was a snow advisory out, and only four-wheel drive trucks could be out, and you weren't supposed to be on the roads. And I lived in a trailer court in Jefferson County where there's more four-wheel drive trucks than there are people. And they were all over my neighborhood. You guys know what I'm talking about. And they were in my neighborhood, and over a period of days, they created ruts in my neighborhood. And those big old tires, wide wheel span, and all that. Well, then they lifted the advisory, and we could all get out. Well, I had a Chevette. Narrow wheel span and little tires. So I had a decision to make, and that was, do I want to go down the road like this, with the wheels in this rut, or do I want to go down in this rut? And I could pick my rut and let go. I could read the newspaper while I'm going down the rut where everybody'd been before me. But don't miss this little silly point. If I wanted to get out of the rut, it took some hard steering to get out of the rut to create a new rut. Okay? So anyway, take that for whatever it's worth, but don't just get stuck doing what you've always done if there's a better way to do it. All right? Man, time flies. Number four, fourth practice is they enable other people to act. They enable others to act. They get other people involved. It's not a one-man or a one-woman show. It's a team effort. That's what he did in chapter 2. After he did some preliminary investigation and examination, he pulled the people together, and it's changed from I to we. And chapter 3 talks about all these people. You take that gate, you take that gate, you go to that gate. He didn't have to build every gate and put his name that this was built by Nehemiah. Can I give you a little tip? Don't put any names on anything in your church.
Amen.
Don't put names on anything in your church. Please. Because you know what that means, but in 20 years, some pastor's going to die over that. Because they're going to need to move that wall, or they're going to need to sell that piano or something. And, oh well, it makes me shudder. Anyway. So they enable other people to act. It's a team effort. Get people involved. Create trust. How do you create trust with other people? Honesty. How do you use it? How do you destroy trust? Dishonesty. Not doing what you say you would do. Build trust. Build collaboration. Create a team spirit. This is our mission. This is our ministry. This is not his or hers. It's ours, right? I love it in churches when people talk about we instead about he or she or they. Well, I don't know what they were thinking. Let's make this we. They invest in relationships. They invest in collaboration. From chapter 2, 17 on, this was a team effort. They worked together. They guarded the city together. They were prepared to fight together, and they built together. And it was a team effort. And if you'll look, when they completed the wall in chapter 6, 15, they could look around and say, look what we did. Team effort. So effective leaders enable other people to act. Don't be a one-man band. Don't be a one-man show. Great leaders are not always visible. Great leaders are not always the ones getting the attention. Sometimes it's the leading from the back. Everybody with me? All right? And pastors, we have to guard against this because we like attention. And we're no different from the layman. We all like attention. But good, effective leadership doesn't seek attention, it seeks success. Regardless, as it was said yesterday by Richard, of who gets the credit. Okay? So build into other people, invest in other people, train other people, equip other people, encourage other people, and collaborate with other people. I love when teams work together. I just love that. And winning teams work together. Winning churches work together. All right? Any comments about that? Do you agree with that?
One of the things that Nehemiah did too is he chopped it up into small units.
Yeah.
Because the whole wall
Mm-hmm.
is overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
But each family could see right now.
That's a good point, Debbie. Thank you. She said that Nehemiah chopped the project up into smaller parts where families could do a small part instead of being overwhelmed by the whole. And that's a great point. In leadership, we learn how to use people and learn how to delegate and learn how to chop things into smaller parts. When everybody, this is what I believe very firmly, that everybody has a role to play. Everybody has a place in the body. And it's important and imperative that we all do what we can do to make the whole body work. And we're not in competition. We're not in who gets what. We're there to help each other perform effectively and to minister effectively. And there's a lot we could say about that from Corinthians. The body is a unit. If everybody was a nose, if the whole thing was a nose, where would the sense of hearing be? Plus, it'd look horrible. But every part's important. And if you do your part, if if you do your role, that helps the body be successful. So it's enable others to act. That's a really important point in effective leadership, is pulling other people in. And let me say this before we move to our last point. Don't underestimate people who may appear to be inadequate. Don't underestimate the people that may not be as charismatic, as outgoing. Don't underestimate anybody in the kingdom. Look at who God picked. He picked people that stuttered, couldn't talk plain. You know, he picked people that had committed horrible crimes. I mean, he did not always pick the people you would have, you know, in your yearbook said most likely to succeed. You know, so there's people in your church who are waiting to be developed. You believe that? There's people in your church that are waiting to be developed. There's young people in your church that need somebody to come alongside them, put an arm around them, say, hey, why don't you go with me? I'm going to go over here and do this. Go with me and I'll buy you a sandwich and we'll spend the afternoon together. Investing in their life, investing in what they do, growing up leaders when they spend time with us. So it's looking for people and enabling them, giving them the tools, giving them permission to fail. One of the hardest things for me, and there's a lot of dads in here, I don't know if this is hard for anybody else, but it was a lesson that I had to learn with my son especially, or with even my grandkids, to not do it for them. Okay, we're gonna screw this thing in. Well, I could do it in about 3 seconds. And it takes 3 days, you know. But they're trying to get their coordination, their hand-eye coordination. They're trying to figure out which way to turn it. And it's not doing it for them, but it's helping them know how to do it until finally they're doing it by themselves. That's enabling other people to act. Training, mentoring, equipping is hard work and time-consuming. But that's how you raise up leaders. How you raise up people. David Yates, who is now our manager here for a year, before that he spent 9 with his dad and mom. And when he got here, he probably didn't know beans about the stuff he knows now. But over a period of 9 years, watching, learning, failing, getting shocked, getting cut, getting whatever, now he's our manager. That's a period of time of learning from his dad and his mom and other people, until he now has that role. And there's people in your church like that sit there that need your help, need your equipping, need your partnership. Effective leaders enable other people to act. They don't do it all themselves. Okay, last point. Effective leaders encourage the heart. They're encouragers. They're encouragers. To encourage the heart means to give heart to other people. It give courage to other people. Give recognition to other people. You pat them on the back. You recognize them privately and publicly. A note in the mail, an email, a text, a smile, a handshake, a thank you. It's amazing what one little word like that will do for somebody. Just a little thanks, or just a little good job. I told you that earlier this week, what Sam Alford did for me. But an exercise we do once in a while in our pastor gatherings, I think we've done it twice now, that's kind of fun. I just go to the dollar store and I buy, $75, $65 worth of just trinkets. I mean, I just go down through the aisles. They don't even have to make sense. It could be a bottle of a thing of glue. It could be a soap dish. It could be a spinner. It does. I mean, there's no rhyme or reason to it. You just buy it and throw it in the cart and take it, pay for it, and then we go to these pastoral meetings, and I have a table, and I'll just throw them out on the table. And then the instruction at the beginning of the event is, if at any time during this event you want to say thank you or say something to one of your colleagues, just put your hand up, interrupt, and you pick up one of these trinkets and take it to that person and tell them something, okay? And so what happens is these pastors are so ingenious, they'll look at these little trinkets and they'll come up with something to say to somebody else. Jim, can you remember any of those? They're really cool, but you take it to somebody and you say, you know, when I saw this, it reminded me like a thing of super glue. You know, it reminded me that I've watched you go through a really hard time and you just stuck with it. And you just, you know, you didn't give up. And this glue reminds me that you stuck with it. And I just want to thank you for that. Just little goofy things like that. We had one there was a little bottle of glue gone or goof off or something like that. And it was, they asked for forgiveness. So this reminds me that this is to remove something, and I need to ask for forgiveness for something. And that encourages the heart. And it's just the thing we do for a couple of days and by the end of the day, by the end of the event, almost all those things are gone, and people have been encouraged. It's just, now here's what you can't do if you do that. If you think that's a good idea, you can't wait for somebody to come to you and give you a trinket, because you'll be disappointed. The purpose is not who's going to say it to you. The purpose is you say it to somebody. Because if you sit there and say, well, it's third day and nobody said anything to me, you're going to be really upset. That's not the purpose. Purpose is to give somebody encouragement. So anyway, effective leaders encourage the heart. Encourage the heart. A thank you note. A pat on the back. Who is there in your church that you need to encourage, that you need to say thank you to, that you need to pat on the back, that you need to just recognize? Those unsung heroes in your church, those unsung heroes in your neighborhood, your mail person. Hey, thanks for bringing the mail every day. You know, garbage man, thanks for driving this stinky truck around and emptying my garbage. I just want you to know I noticed that. Thank you. Appreciate it. Just anything you can do. Great leaders are encouragers. Okay? And it doesn't have to be public. Just do it privately. A little thank you note. Okay? All right, those are the 5 effective practices of leaders. I think they're pretty good. I think that they're very practical, and we could do a study on about anybody or many texts in the Scripture, and those are very, very scriptural and very biblical. Any comments about them before we go? It's 10 o'clock. Any comments about this study at all that you want to make, or comments or anything before we go? Thank you. Thank you. I want to make 2 statements before we go, and I do appreciate that, and I appreciate you being here. And again, and I'm not trying to sell stuff. I'd like for Steve and them to sell things. But you might pick up this study and use it as a Bible study in your small group. There's a lot of good things in here. Just use it as a template. You don't have to use what I use, but use it as a template, because I think our churches need this. So we can get some loiterers off of the signpost and get them into the work. But let me make two statements and then I'm done. Good leaders must also be good followers. Good leaders must also be good followers. Okay? Nobody that I know of knows it all and is perfect at all of it. We can always learn from somebody, and they need to be good leaders. Good leaders need to be good followers. And then the last thing I want to mention is leadership is not merely positional, it's relational. That was mentioned early in the week. It's not just a position, it's a relationship. Okay? So may God bless you as you go to your church, to your home, to your work, and may He make you an effective leader. You are a leader, right? Say it. I am a leader. You are a leader. May you be an effective one. Lord, I pray your blessing upon our people. And we've talked about a lot of things, but I just pray that you'll help us to take what you want us to learn from all this and to be the kind of leader that you want us to be. There are people out there that will be impacted and influenced by our life. May we do that effectively and point them to you, we pray.